Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Yesha. If you're new here, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel for more videos like this about ERAS, residency, radiology, life, etc. It would mean a lot to me. Today we're going to be talking about advantages of community programs, or not advantages, but like pros of community-based programs, things maybe you didn't think of, and yeah, if this is interesting to you, please keep watching. I truly believe that community radiology programs really set you up for the real world. And what do I mean by that? Well, most radiologists in the US are not in academics, they're in private practice. So chances are that unless you're really dedicated to research or even teaching, you might end up going into private practice yourself. And when you're in private practice, you're going to realize that a lot of the cushions that come with you in training that are around you are not there anymore when you're in practice. Things like having fellows to answer a lot of the questions, they are not there anymore. The techs are not always as knowledgeable, or maybe the techs are more general and they don't just do one thing, whether it's CT or MR or X-ray. Sometimes you have to do a lot more problem solving in private practice than you would have to do in academics. There's just overall less people in the department. It's really just you. And I think that community programs really set you up very well for this type of responsibility because you are that person as a resident. You don't have fellows to go to, like I said, and you really have to do a lot of the problem solving yourself. And so in that way, I think that community programs really set you up to be very successful in the real world. The second part of that is also the speed. I think that private practices really, in order to earn the money, you have to do the work, right? You are oftentimes paid based on your speed, and you really have to be able to keep up with the number of cases that are coming in. I mean, it's just insane, and that work is usually split between a very few number of people rather than in academics where you have tons of attendings, you have lots of fellows, and then you have residents also to help with the list. It's just not like that in private practice. You might be reading like every single thing that comes through the door between 8 and 5, and you don't have a ton of people to rely on for backup. And so the speed that comes with community-based programs, while definitely challenging when you're learning, I think it really sets you up for success when you go out into the real world and you are expected to hit the ground running when you walk in on day one. And so for those reasons, I really think that community programs do set you up for the real world of radiology. And again, it just depends like what practice you want to go into, and obviously if you're someone who has like certain aspirations of staying in academics forever, then that's obviously not going to be you and you won't have to worry so much about that. But even still, the speed that you learn in community practices can easily translate in academics, because now academics are expecting people to read faster, especially the attendings. The residents don't usually have to worry so much about that. It's really the attendings, even in a community-based program, that really have to worry about that, getting the work done and getting the list down. And so I think the speed is very important, and you really get a very good sense of how fast you sort of have to go when you're in a community-based program. Community programs are usually also smaller. There's a smaller number of residents, but also a smaller number of faculty. The department is usually smaller, and you get to know everybody really well. And so for all these reasons, I really think that the community programs often tend to be tighter knit. You are much closer with all of the attendings. It's not just one or two that you've chosen as mentors, but everybody really knows you. And I think that just makes for a different environment than academics, because you are kind of walking into like a group of people that you know everything about them, and it just depends on like whether a program is very welcoming or not. But it's just a different vibe. Like, it's just like when you choose a college and they say we have like small class size versus large class size. You have to decide what you like, but I think that can be a real advantage or a pro in a small program, because everyone knows you, and it's just kind of a nice place to work when it's just a nice environment like that. And just kind of going along with that, it means that you really have no place to hide. You can't be like, oh, I don't know, I'm just like, a first year, I'm not, you can't hide from anybody because everyone knows who you are. It's a small environment, and in that way you're really forced to learn, which can be a good thing. So that's good, because it really forces you to, learn the knowledge, keep up with the speed, and it really makes you learn radiology at a much faster pace than you would maybe otherwise. And I think that's a really big positive, because sometimes if I'm not forced to learn something, then I may not study for a while. So having that ability to know, okay, everyone here has expectations of me, I think that can be a good way to help you learn. The next thing is just the fact that a lot of community programs don't have fellows, and this really gives you an advantage because you get to do not only all of the procedures and all the troubleshooting and everything that comes along with no fellows, but you also get to read a lot of the advanced modalities, so like really specialized CT temporal bone, etc. You also get to read a lot of the MRs that come through. You won't have anyone trying to fight you for the cases, so really it's all yours, and I think that can be very advantageous, especially if you are trying to go into private practice and maybe you don't want to do a fellowship in neuro, but you want to be able to read some neuro, for example. You'll have a lot of experience doing a lot of MR, you'll have experience doing, you know, maybe lumbar punctures, whatever it is you want to do. You'll have enough experience as a resident that you may not have to, you know, become reoriented to that as an attending or have to do a fellowship for it. So it's really nice training, not having fellows, especially if you are procedural or you are interested in something that uses a lot of advanced modalities. It can be a really big advantage as you look for a job. Having no fellows also usually means that you get to run all of the conferences, and while it is a little bit of extra work as a resident, I think it gives you a lot of experience with how to talk to clinicians, what they want to know about certain cases, building your own confidence about what you know, and just learning how to run a conference. You know, you're going to be doing those things as an attending, and you might even be doing them as a fellow, and it's a good way to kind of give you that confidence going into your fellowship, going into attendinghood, knowing that, you know, I've done this a ton of times. It doesn't make you nervous anymore. And I think as a resident you have a little bit more like, oh, I don't know, I'm just a resident type of thing, so it can kind of be a nice, like, it can just be a nice way to introduce yourself to all of those things and run a multidisciplinary conference, run tumor board from a radiology perspective, and just get a lot of experience doing that as a resident. I think one thing that's a big advantage that people don't really talk about enough is just learning how private practice works. A lot of people will end up doing fellowship at an academic institution. I think that most fellowships are at academic institutions, and so you really get to see how academics works. Everyone has exposure to academics in one way or another, but not a lot of people have vice versa, right? Not a lot of people have experience in private practice unless you've done residency in private practice. So you don't know how things are run. You don't know how things work. And I think it can be very interesting to learn as a resident, like how things are starting to work as a private practice. You know, what are the expectations? How does it work when you don't have a fellow to do stuff for you? What does a job look like in private practice, right? Like, what am I supposed to look for? All of these things are really important as you start looking for a job, which is the phase that I'm in right now. It's very nice to have that experience of knowing, like, okay, this is what private practice is like, and now I'm in an academic institution, I know what academics are like, and so I have a very easy way of figuring out, you know, what I would like to go into. At least I have experience in both as I make that decision. Whereas if I was in academics for my entire training, I think it would have been a lot harder to know exactly what to expect from a private practice job. And so people don't really talk about that enough, like the business side of radiology, but I do think that you get a lot of good experience as a resident in a private practice, just learning, like, how does it work financially? How do you get paid? What are contracts like? How do you choose somebody? It's a lot different in private practice than academics, and if you are interested in that, private practices, the attendings are more than happy to kind of talk to you about that stuff and help you figure out, like, what you would like to do in the future. And I think that's a very important thing to realize when you're looking for a residency. Just if you have any idea of, like, what you want to do in the future, that can be a big advantage that you may not otherwise consider. I think those are my main things. I think it's really important to not have fellows. I think it's really important to be able to be the person who troubleshoots everything, to know how to do that stuff. It's actually really interesting. I'll give you an anecdote for myself. I didn't have fellows when I was a resident, and I did a lot of the, like, mammo procedures, and I did a lot of, like, I just spent a lot of time in mammo. And now at Memorial Sloan Kettering, it's just a different world, right? Like, so much stuff is done for me that I had to do before myself, and, like, it's pretty crazy just thinking, like, well, I'm glad I had that experience, because if I was just here and I got a job, I wouldn't even know where to start in terms of troubleshooting certain things or trying to figure out what to do with certain, you know, like, but, you know, there's a lot of stuff that, like, you just don't realize when everything is done for you. Even in terms of, like, patient positioning and, like, how do I get this, how do I figure out, like, if I need a delay, how do I figure that out? And if the techs just do it all for you, you're very lucky. And I think it's a good skill to have going into attendinghood, to know, like, how to troubleshoot so many different things that come your way. And I think some of those skills can only be learned if you are forced to do them as a resident. And so I'm a big advocate for community programs, especially if you can find a nice hybrid program. I think they can be really strong and you just have to do your homework on which ones are good and which ones are malignant. And same obviously goes for academics. There are tons of malignant academic programs. Not every program is created equal. So yeah, I hope this helps when you decide like where you want to apply, what type of skills you're going to gain, and just overall deciding like where you want to go in the future. I hope it's helpful. But anyways, I will see you all in my next video. Bye.